38. Removal of a swelling. Vladika John was to us orphans like a loving father, a great friend who was very understanding. In the orphanage he would even have parties for us several times a year, for he knew that we children also had to have some fun. He was a spiritual man, a man of holy life, and yet he also understood secular life. We could always come to him and ask his help when we were heavy-hearted, and he would always understand and lovingly console us. He would always joke with us so that we never felt sad. He especially loved me because I was the first girl who came to live in his orphanage. He also used to visit me here occasionally, and he very much loved my children, who called him Grandpa. My daughter Olga was baptized by him at St. Tikhon's orphanage house here in San Francisco. When he died, I lost both a great friend and a father. I had a husband who was a ruffian and an atheist. He used to beat me. I complained to Vladika, who summoned him and asked, "Why do you beat Valya?" To this my husband answered, "Because she works and does not give me the money." "And where does she spend the money?" Vladika said. "She spends it on children. It is very good that she spends it on children and not on loose living. If you will hurt Valya, I will take her back to St. Tikhon's orphanage. It will not be difficult for me to support her there. I brought up, with God's help, 3,500 orphans, so that will not be a problem." My husband promised not to hurt me anymore, and was a good husband after that while Vladika was alive. But when Vladika died, he was bad again, and I divorced him. The reason I describe all this to you is that a miracle occurred because of it. Evidently, when my husband hit me on the chest, a lump developed that was the size of a fist. I went to see a doctor, Mrs. Shimkin, and showed it to her. She told me that a series of injections should dissolve it. After several injections, the lump hardened. Then I went to Father Mitrofan and told him everything that had happened. He told me, "Let us go to dear Blessed John's sepulchre and serve a panikhida to Vladichenka, as you call him. We'll take some oil from his lamp, and you anoint yourself 3 times, saying, 'Through the prayers of our holy Archbishop John, O God, give health to the slave of God Valentina, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.'" I did anoint myself on 4 occasions just as he said, and everything went away just as he said it would. Meanwhile, Dr. Shimkin had had a concilium of doctors to decide what to do about me, and she called me up. I told her that I did not have that swelling anymore, but she did not believe me, and told me to come to her so she could see for herself and be convinced. And when I came to her, she examined me, and was amazed that I had no swelling at all. When she asked whether she could come with me to visit that holy man's place, I told her, "Of course, I even have a key to his sepulchre. We'll go and pray before him, and you'll light a candle for him." To this she said that she was Jewish. I told her that people of all faiths and denominations go to Vladichenka. So we went. She prayed very hard, and then said to me, "I felt much better in my heart as I placed a candle for your holy bishop." Dr. Shimkin, a good woman, died several years ago, and Father Mitrofan is paralyzed now and cannot write. Now I don't know what to do. You've probably heard that 3 years ago I almost died during an operation, and even now I sometimes don't feel very well. But Blessed John saved me once more. All who knew me served panikhidas for him so that he would save me. He always protects me from all sorts of troubles and accidents. I'll write to you more about this some other time. Bless me, I'm asking your holy prayers. Sinful Valentina Diatropov, July 1985. 39. Intercession for a Jewish boy. One Russian Jewish lady had a sick son, and no matter how she took care of him, everything was to no avail. She was in near despair. She was told that the Russians had a Batyushka Yoan, who served in the cathedral, and through whose prayers many received healings. So she went to the cathedral and waited until Blessed John was through with the services and was leaving. She came up to him and asked him to pray for her son, whom she decided to call Misha, the Russian diminutive for Michael, so that Blessed John would not know that he was a Jew. Blessed John just looked at her and said, "I shall pray for Moshe," or Moses, the boy's actual name. Soon after that, the boy began to get well. Vsevolod Alexandrovich Ryer, Brazil, South America. In Russian Life, September 27, 1966. 40. A Paschal Resurrection from Near Death. A nurse from the Jewish hospital in Shanghai told the following. During Pascha week, Blessed John came to the hospital in order to visit some Russian Orthodox people who were there. Going through one of the wards, he stopped in front of a screen that concealed the bed where an elderly Jewish lady was dying. Her relatives in the vestibule of the same hospital were already expecting her death. Blessed John raised the cross over her screen and loudly exclaimed, "Christ is risen." The sick lady came to and asked for water, and Blessed John, going to the nurse, said, "The sick lady wants to drink." The hospital personnel were amazed at the change in this lady, who had just been about to die. Soon she got well and left the hospital. Vsevolod Alexandrovich Ryer, Brazil, South America, September 27, 1966. 41. Salvation of Shanghai from bombing. In Shanghai in 1945, when the war was over and the first Americans came, my son brought to our place 3 American pilots for a visit. We had supper and were sitting and talking. The subject of the talk was, of course, the war that had just ended. The senior pilot, addressing me and my husband, said, "You here in Shanghai have a great holy man of prayer, thanks to whom you suffered no damage." When I asked whom he was talking about, he answered that they had once been issued an order to bomb Shanghai. With only several minutes remaining before the flight, the order had been cancelled. "We know that someone was praying very hard for you, for your salvation," said the pilot. In my mind, as well as in the mind of my husband, just one name flashed: Blessed John. Only he could have begged God with his prayers for us to be spared like that, and no matter whom I talked with about this, everyone without exception named our beloved Blessed John, our highly honored pastor, as the one. S. Fedorovna, Australia, May 11, 1963. 42. Guardian of Spanish Orthodox Christians. The Lord continually shows us his loving protection through his faithful servant, Blessed John, the founder of Orthodox missionary work in Spain. I will tell you of one of his miracles, worked unquestionably by his intercession in our own house. One night, my wife and I were already in bed and already asleep. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, suddenly, a very strange noise coming from the kitchen awoke both of us. We immediately got up and saw that the freezer was burning in the rear. The flames had reached the roof of the kitchen, which was already becoming black. Beside the freezer was one window, no more than 15 centimeters away, fitted with acrylic lace curtains. This material is, as you can imagine, extremely combustible, but nothing burned. Afterwards, we realized that a portrait of Blessed John, with a piece of his riasa, was hanging on the wall which separates our bedroom from the kitchen. We glorify the Lord our true God and our blessed Archbishop, whose protection was so wondrously shown to us sinners. Jose G. Oncinahevia, Madrid, Spain, October 22nd, November 4th, 1977. 43. Restoration of mental health. Forgive me for taking your time by writing these lines and for my poor language, but I wish to share with you some things concerning my meetings with Blessed Bishop John. I was overjoyed to hear people saying that it will not be long before we will see his incorrupt relics. May that happen, O Lord. I first met him when the Lord made me, the sinful one, worthy to spend the first week of Great Lent in the San Francisco Cathedral when Blessed John was serving. I must confess that I understood very little of all the long readings and prayers which he read himself. However, with the exception of when I had to work, I spent the whole of Great Lent without going out of the cathedral. The first week flew by in an instant. I was in such an ecstatic state when I experienced the same thing when Blessed John visited our protection church in order to consecrate it. I never spoke to him personally, considering myself unworthy of taking his time. I shall never forget the time when I was present at his funeral. Now I will tell you of 2 instances when he heard me, which occurred after his death. 1. My sister Juliana remained in the old country and lived alone in our little house. She was alone and sick, but never complained about her fate. Only once did she write asking that I pray hard for her. Since she felt that her head didn't work right anymore, she could not pray and felt dizzy very often. She had problems with circulation and eventually died from gangrene. I was very upset and thought to myself, what can I do? My prayers wouldn't pierce the ceiling to heaven, but I knew the power of our holy bishop's prayers, so I had a panakita served for him and sent her his photograph with a note saying that she herself should pray hard hard to him. In her very next letter, she answered me, "My dear sister, I cannot thank God enough. My head is fully clear. I can pray. I feel as though someone's hand took it all away from me. Truly wondrous is God and his saints." 2. When I went into retirement, a question was placed before me. Where should I go so as to save myself and not perish in our frightful times? When still a little girl, I had wanted to enter a convent, but the Lord had directed me on a different path. It seemed that now the time had come, although late in life, to fulfill my old dream. But where? And so, 3 nights in a row, I saw the same dream. Blessed John appeared before me, so clear, as if he were alive. I stood before him with trepidation, while he was clearly and distinctly pointing to our protection church, where I live in the rectory, and saying, "In it you shall be saved." All 3 nights I had exactly the same dream, so I dropped my dreaming of going somewhere, and I live happily here cleaning our church and unfailingly remembering our dear blessed Archbishop John. Glory be to God for all things. I beg you to kindly forgive me for having you take so much of your time to read all this. I ask your prayers and blessings. With love in Christ, Sinful Alexandra Kiritis, Los Angeles, California, July 14, 1982. 44. Deliverance from death. Editor's note: there lived in Shanghai 2 sisters, Sophia and Anna Chioff, who were absolutely devoted to Blessed John. Daughters of a priest who was persecuted by the Soviets, they were compelled to flee from their village after horrendous difficulties, walking for many miles in order to cross the Chinese border. This experience made them aware of another world. They never married and dedicated their whole lives to the service of the Church, at first in Shanghai and then in America. In San Francisco, they unfailingly continued to labor in the cathedral where the Blessed One served and was later buried. Like myrrh-bearing women, humbly and quietly keeping in their much-suffering hearts the wondrous miracles he worked, they followed Blessed John in absolute devotion wherever they were needed, at first to his parish, then to his orphanage and elsewhere. Upon his death they mourned him with bitter tears, being living witnesses to the mighty works of God wrought through his faithful servant. They survived him by not too many years. Anna died on April 3, 1973, and Sophia died 6 years later on February 14, 1979. Their silent witness cannot be forgotten. Upon our request, these 2 sisters sent us the following brief information, which refers to the Shanghai period of Blessed John's life, right after World War II. At this time, Soviet agents were enticing Russian immigrants in China to return to Russia. Blessed John led an energetic campaign against this and thus saved many lives, but his action proved to be threatening to his life. There were several attempts to kill him. Many of his devoted people, these Chioff sisters, altar boys, orphans, church school students, and others, kept a watch day and night. They would make sure that at least 2 or 3 of them were near the persecuted hierarch. His senior bishop, Victor, was on the side of the Soviets and eventually went to the Soviet Union, taking along many followers, who all bitterly regretted this move later when it was too late. Blessed John was right. Anna Chioff, the author of the following, also lived in New York City to make sure that Blessed John would be taken care of when he was at synod meetings in that city. See Pravoslavny Blagovestnik, number 6, June 1969, pages 81 through 82. In Shanghai, there was a remarkable miraculous case involving a certain Spaniard, a man from Hailai. He was hospitalized in a French hospital that had Roman Catholic sisters as nurses. His condition was so hopeless that he was placed behind a screen so that no one would bother him during his last moments of life. There was no hope of recovery. He was to die at any moment. Suddenly a bell rang in his ward. A nurse sister came and saw him sit up by himself and turned to her with a question. Who was here just now? What kind of priest was he? I was dying, and he prayed right next to me, and I felt my health come back to me. The sister said that she saw nobody. When he left the hospital, the man visited all the Roman Catholic churches, hoping there to find the one who had healed him. One of the Catholic priests advised him to also try to visit our cathedral and look there, since, as he explained, there was an Orthodox bishop, an unusual man, a kind of fool for Christ. During this time, when Bishop Victor had already gone over to the Soviets but still lived in the cathedral house, we were all upset because many Soviet agents would visit Bishop Victor. The boys from the orphanage and commercial schools made an attempt not to leave our bishop, Blessed John, alone by himself without surveillance. Thus, one evening we came to the cathedral for Vespers. During the service, we saw a man of huge proportions enter the church. He was well dressed, had a very handsome blue suit, and a huge red flower in his lapel. We got all upset thinking he was a Bolshevik. After Vespers, when everyone went to receive a blessing at the dismissal, we saw that he was also walking up. We quietly drew closer to the bishop, intending, in case of danger, to defend him by at least being a crowd. But to our amazement, we saw how this giant approached the Blessed One, got down before him on his knees, asked for his holy blessing, and then explained that he had found the one who had healed him so miraculously in the hospital. The hierarch lit up, gently smiled at him, and blessed him. We all uttered a sigh of relief. No danger threatened his life, but God's glory shone over him. This man thanked him, calling him a universal hierarch. In Shanghai there was a certain Mother Marina who used to instruct us. He is a great holy man. He is a great man of prayer, an intercessor for us before the Lord, a miracle worker, a man of clairvoyance. And she told us an incident that had happened to a certain lady who came to the cathedral, dressed simply and weeping. The lady said that her sister in Russia had had a mental breakdown and was crazy, and that there was not any way she could help her. Everyone, of course, sent her to our holy hierarch, Blessed John. Having listened to her story, did not say a word to her, but only blessed her with the sign of the cross and left. Burst out in tears more bitter than before, and began to murmur to all who were there for having sent her to someone who didn't even feel sorry for her. About a month passed. Once when Blessed John was serving in the cathedral, this woman came back again. This time she had a letter in her hands, which had informed her that her sister Barbara had recovered. The lady had come to thank the Lord for it. The bishop was then censing the cathedral, walking with the censer around the church, and was approaching her. At this moment she mentally said to him, "See, without your prayers my sister got well again." As the bishop was passing by and sensing in her direction, he said to her, "Well, glory be to God. Thank God your sister Barbara got well." And he went on. The poor woman was terrified. Her legs began to burn. She wished she could fall through the earth out of shame. She had been saying, "Without your prayers my sister got well," when the hierarch was directing her to the mercy of God, calling her sister by name, although she had never managed to tell him her name before. She of course understood what a great servant of God was our hierarch, Blessed Archbishop John. Yes, our holy hierarch was indeed a universal hierarch. Anna Chekhov, New York City, 1969. 45. Deliverance from fire. 1. The renewed icon. With joy, I want to share with you and tell everyone about Archbishop John. I knew him from Shanghai, where as a young girl I attended commercial school. The bishop would often visit our school and bless us children. My whole life has been spent as if it were under his wonder-working protection. Otherwise, it is impossible to explain the many cases when my life was miraculously preserved from unavoidable death through his holy prayers which protected me. In my childhood, when I was 12 or 13 years old, I saw a dream while in Shanghai. I saw someone take me by the hand, lead me, and show me the Lord of Sabaoth, who sat in heaven together with all the saints. When I stood at the foot of the steps, I saw God blessing all his saints, and at the same time blessing me as well. I saw a wondrous light emanating from the Lord's outstretched arms. It was so bright, like the strong rays of sunlight. These rays shone in straight lines from the hand of the Lord, from the top of the step on which I stood. Many years have passed since I saw this dream, and now I possess an icon which Blessed John loved so much to pray before when in Shanghai. The icon belonged to Baron and Baroness Maria von Dellinghausen and is ancient. It began to miraculously renew itself, as many icons did at that time in the Far East. It was all dark, painted on a wooden board, and it was impossible to discern anything of what was depicted on it. Blessed John would drop wax on those spots which had begun to to clear up. Now all the saints' faces were visible, and you can see the wax spots up to today. Around the head of the Heavenly Queen, the light, cleared-up spot on the halo moves like a flame that goes up and down. The icon depicts all the saints on the clouds. The Lord God of Sabaoth is enthroned above a series of clouds, which serves as steps, and on them are depicted all the saints, just like I saw them in my dream when I was a little girl. It was Blessed John's favorite icon, before which he prayed many times, and was given me by the Baroness. 2. My mysterious healer. Many years passed by and scattered us all to different countries. Bishop John found himself in Tubabao in the Philippines. Later he was assigned to France, and we, that is, I with my husband and daughter Tatiana, came to Brazil, where we settled in São Paulo. In 1954 I caught the Spanish grippe, which utterly wore me out. Besides, it repeated itself many times. I was sick for a month and a half with a high temperature, not getting up from bed. Every day my temperature was over 103, with decimals varying, and no medication helped. Every day a doctor would come from the apothecary and would give me injections of anti-grippe and penicillin, but nothing would help. The temperature stayed that high and would not drop. There was no one to look after me, since my husband worked at the electrical station and his working hours varied. Our daughter was attending school and came home at around 5 p.m. because her school was far, and it took a long time to get home. So I was compelled to stay home alone. My husband would lock the house, and he and my daughter Tatiana would keep the key. After several weeks in such a state, and all the time in delirium, I finally came to myself. That was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember this quite well because when I opened my eyes, right in front of me was the clock on the nightstand. At that very time I saw an elder at the foot of my bed. He was dressed in vestments of a gray-blue color. The very fabric of his clothing remained clear in my mind, as if it was hand-woven. In his left hand he held a tall wooden staff higher than his head, and this staff was made out of a branch with knots. The elder was not of a high stature. He had not very thick gray hair that fell on his shoulders, a rather thin gray beard, and a gray mustache. His eyes seemed blue. Looking at him, I did not at once recognize Blessed John, whose eyes were not blue but brown. He stood there nodding his head at me, and all the time he was blessing me. Fear fell upon me. I covered myself with the blanket and thought, how could he have come into the house when it was locked with a key? Besides, usually the floorboards would squeak here and there when stepped on. All this I had not heard, neither the squeaking nor someone entering the front door. Lying there under the blanket, I thought to myself that perhaps all this was my imagination. But when I again lifted the blanket, the same elder stood there as before, nodding his head and continuing to bless me. I do not know what happened next, but only that I fell into a deep sleep. When my husband returned from work and my daughter from school, they did not wake me up because they saw that I was soundly sleeping. At the same time, the doctor came for the usual injection. Feeling my head, he told my husband that I had no temperature and that there was no need for the injection. However, the doctor and my husband changed the sheet on which I slept, for it was all wet. It seemed as though I was lying in a puddle of water. I slept through the whole night and way into the next day, and woke up only by evening. There was no more temperature, but I was still very weak. In a week I got better and stronger, but who was that holy elder whom I knew healed me, since the doctor had told me that medicine was powerless, and that my only hope was God? I wondered why I hadn't recognized him. I looked everywhere, in all churches, but could not find the face of that holy elder. Now, however, when I look more often at the facial features of Blessed John, I keep finding a great resemblance between him and that holy elder who was blessing me at the time of my illness in Brazil. And I have come to a conclusion that the Lord is guiding all by his great deeds through the holy prayers of Blessed John. 3. Healing of a gallbladder disorder. In 1955, we moved from Brazil to the United States and settled in San Francisco, California. Here, the first of my gallbladder attacks occurred, and I subsequently had a total of 9 such attacks. In 1961 was the worst, 9th attack. I was placed in Moffitt Hospital on the 1st of January, and on the 2nd I underwent surgery. As soon as they opened me up, the gallbladder broke, and there was no hope of saving my life. But a true miracle took place through the prayers of of Archbishop John, the doctor told me later that in 100% of the cases in the history of medicine, people in my particular condition have not survived. Even on my hospital bottle was written, "A miracle." The Lord returned life to me in order that I fulfill a mission placed upon me. My brother Nicholas, who was an altar boy with Blessed John in Shanghai, got sick at about the same time. I wrote many letters to the Holy Bishop in France asking his prayers, but never received an answer. Only after Blessed John returned to San Francisco did he tell me that he had received all the letters and prayed. My dear brother died at a rather young age, and I survived. 4. Rescue from an airplane fire. In 1966, we went on vacation to Lake Tahoe for a few days with our dear friend Nina Holt and her husband. Returning home, we took an airplane, while the Holt family remained for a few more days in Tahoe. They drove us to the airport and stood at the landing strip to watch our plane take off. As soon as I sat down in the airplane, I said that nothing bad would happen to us because Blessed John was with us. I always carry with me a picture of Blessed John, no matter where I travel. This photo of him is always with me. The airplane was small, designed for only 10 or 12 passengers. I sat on the right side with my husband Boris on the left, and only a narrow aisle divided us. It was a wonderful sunny day, and the sun shone brightly through the window. I looked through the window as we took off and saw the outline of pines and evergreens below us. We flew above trees which grew all over the mountains, but suddenly nothing could be seen except blue sky in the windows in front of the pilot, who was wearing earphones and receiving messages, and from both left and right side windows we couldn't see anything because of some cloudiness. Flying forward, the pilot looked back all the time. I mentioned that to my husband, saying what a strange pilot he was. As it turned out, this small airplane, as soon as it had left the ground, had had a fire in both engines. Being inside the airplane, we did not even know that we were being exposed to grave danger. We were the only passengers, including the pilot and captain. There were 4 people in all. To be honest, I did not even feel the danger. It was far from me. And so we flew for a long time in a burning airplane, all the way to Lakeland Airport near Oakland. There, our burning plane quickly landed in the middle of a field where extinguishing trucks were ready all over the place. On top of these vehicles, yellow lights flickered. The captain of the plane quickly opened the door, and some people swiftly pulled us out, throwing us instantly into a truck that came right up to our plane. The truck rushed off with incredible speed, away from the burning plane, and brought us to the Oakland airport. On the way, I asked the driver about our baggage, and he answered, "Lady, forget about your baggage. We only want to save your life." Still not realizing that we had been in such danger, I asked him what had actually happened. "Didn't you know that you were flying in a burning plane?" he responded. As soon as we had taken off into the air, both engines had burst into flames, though we had not known or felt any danger. At the airport, we sat waiting for about 3 hours for them to bring our suitcases, which they did after they had managed to extinguish the burning airplane. The pilot who brought our baggage, while giving it to us, said, "The Lord must have loved someone a lot, because a plane of flame usually explodes in the air after a few minutes, and we flew for a long time and were able to land, extinguish the fire, and save you and us." The pilot concluded that, of course, a miracle occurred. I firmly believe that in the burning airplane, it was the flaming prayers of our great man of prayer and righteous one which saved us from unavoidable disaster. 5. Protection from a bullet. We had an incident in our restaurant right on the Western Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1967. Blessed John was already dead then. Right before then, I saw a dream. I saw Blessed John come into our restaurant dressed all in black, looking a bit stouter than he did during his lifetime. He stopped right on the spot where the piano, with chairs around it, was located. He talked to me about something, then took me and quickly placed me behind himself, as if shielding me with himself from something, and I woke up. The entire next day I was very troubled, but could not explain to myself this tenseness. In the evening of December 24th, I went to our restaurant, but my upset state only increased. At this time, a certain Russian young man came in. He had some argument with an American fellow and got very upset. Soon he ran out of the restaurant, and in a short while returned with a gun in his hand. He went straight to that young American and stuck the gun right in his stomach. I got up and shielded the American. The gun was pointed right in my stomach now. At this moment, someone jumped up from a table where several young men were sitting and quickly moved the man's hand with the gun away from my stomach. This happened on exactly the spot where I saw Blessed John and myself in the dream. The angry young man walked out of the restaurant and fired into the first car that was parked, which turned out to be my husband's car. Then I remembered my dream of the holy bishop, who shielded me with himself, placing me behind himself and saving me from the bullet. Everywhere and always our dear Blessed John guards us, and me, a sinner also. 6. Extinguishing of a fire. On the feast day of Epiphany, Archbishop John blessed our restaurant 2 times. Each time he came with Galena Peculin at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, blessing with holy water the whole restaurant, and all the people who were there at the time, which included my husband and grandmother, since they usually come in earlier than the rest of the employees. The righteous slave of God, constantly serving God and people, did not forget even us sinners during his life and after his death. In 1968, there was a fire in the grocery store on the corner of our block, right next to our restaurant. Only one wall separated us. The fire began from the back side of the grocery store. Our freezer pantry was adjacent to the fence behind that store. We had a fire alarm system working. The wires of the fire alarm immediately burned, and thus gave a signal to the police station to which they were connected. This happened at 9:30 p.m. Our daughter Tanya had just sat down to have supper when she saw a whole mass of smoke coming out from under the wall that separated us from the produce store. The smoke was escaping with incredible speed into our restaurant. I could not understand where all that smoke was coming from, since just the day before we had made a major check of all the electrical wires for fire safety. All these wires were encased in metallic tubes, so the fire could not have started from electricity. At this moment we heard the sirens of fire engines, and looking out, we beheld a frightful sight right next to us. The entire Geary Boulevard had already been blocked against traffic. One could see only fire trucks, an ambulance, and police cars. The firemen worked like clocks. One must give them due praise. They were breaking the windows of the grocery store and fighting the fire. The fire was growing with incredible rapidity because a strong wind was blowing from the ocean, from the west, and our place was to the east of the grocery store. Geary Boulevard is laid out in direct line from the ocean, and strong winds always blow through it. The flames spread very rapidly on 17th Avenue. The fence connecting the store to the house behind it caught on fire. Part of that house was already burned out, and out of it an elderly lady was dragged and given oxygen by the doctors. I was the last one to run out of the restaurant. Inside, everything remained active. All the burners were not shut off because we had no time. All the people who had gathered outside were pushed away by the police to the other side of the street because the gas in our restaurant was not shut off and could blow up any minute. It was a frightful sight. I stood in the middle of Geary Boulevard because people were everywhere. I turned westward to look at the cathedral, turned with a plea to Blessed John, who was resting beneath it in his sepulchre, and uttered aloud, "O righteous hierarch, stop the fire, stop the wind." And at that very minute the wind stopped blowing, as if obedient to a command. There was no movement in the air, and people in the crowd began to talk about it aloud. Look, the wind stopped and doesn't blow anymore." I stood there petrified. I at once thanked Blessed John for the help he sent us. The people all around were amazed, but I could not express what had taken place. I was afraid that they would explain it away in their own way. Indeed, there occurred a true miracle through the prayers of Blessed John. Our restaurant remained unharmed. The flame did not touch it. Nothing in our restaurant was burned. Even the freezer pantry that was right next to the grocery store remained untouched. It was as if the flame had jumped across the restaurant and begun to burn the fence and the adjacent house on 17th Avenue, which was severely damaged. The next day our insurance company changed all the carpets, painted and changed the velvet that we had on the walls. We did not close the restaurant even for a day, but only put in air cleaning machines that sucked out smoke. The smell of smoke remained in the restaurant for almost a year because it kept coming from next door. I often recall all that transpired, and mentally, or out loud, I thank Blessed John for his zealous prayers for us. God grant the heavenly kingdom to thee, O righteous man of God, O great man of prayer for all of us. Vera I. Vertlugen, San Francisco, California, May 18, 1977. 46. Disappearance of arthritic pain. In 1937, I came to Shanghai from Japan for a short time. My longtime friend, Father Vasily Chuvashev, invited me to dinner at the bishop's house in order to introduce me to Bishop John. During the meal, the hierarch asked me many questions about Japan and the life of the Russian colony in the Japanese cities. The talk lasted the whole evening. The first conversation with Bishop John was unforgettable for me because that evening I at once felt that enormous spiritual influence he was exerting upon my soul. Since then, contact with Blessed John was not interrupted until the very last days of his earthly life. In Shanghai and here in San Francisco, he was always to me a spiritual director, and even now, when he is no longer with us, I and many others feel his unseen spiritual influence upon our souls and hearts. I took part in helping Blessed John to move much of his flock to America. We were then begging to be with him, but he was sent to Europe. After his departure, as always when he would leave, I felt great heaviness in my soul, but when some conflict would arise and some decision would have to be made, I almost always would see Blessed John in a dream or receive a letter from him, and at once the heaviness would disappear. In 1963, I was sick with arthritis and remained so for a very long time. Several times I was put in a hospital, staying there for over a month at a time. I was also forced to be bedridden at home. I was hardly able to move about. One day in June, when my family went to the Russian River, I did not go with them. I was in no condition to travel and decided to stay home because all my bones ached badly. I could not eat, drink, or sleep. At night the pain increased to such an extent that I called Kaiser Hospital and an ambulance came to get me. They brought me at first to the general reception area, but when my doctor came, he at once transferred me to the emergency ward for the seriously ill. Our Blessed John was then already in San Francisco, for we were already going through those terrible days when the building of the new cathedral was being halted. With the arrival of Archbishop John, the building was resumed, and donations were flowing in literally like rivers as an answer to his call. But at that time there was the court trial, that very trial which one cannot remember without pain of heart, when our dear Blessed John, our great man of prayer, was placed on the bench of the accused. This trial was in actuality a trial of our holy bishop. We know that before the trial, Judge Day, who deeply respected Blessed John, offered him to stay in an adjacent room during the trial, but our Blessed One turned down this offer and sat in court together with those who wished to be with him, Hierarchs Leonti, Sava, and Nectari. In spite of this terrible, trying time for Blessed John, he would not forget the sick. He visited me in the hospital several times, once even with the miracle-working Kursk icon. I was rapidly losing weight. I weighed only 94 pounds and looked like mere skin and bones. I could eat nothing, and the pain was unbearable. And then, precisely during these difficult days of my sickness, at the end of June, Blessed John came one day and said only these words, "That's all right, tomorrow you'll feel better." The next day the pain was gone, as if it had never existed, as if I had never been sick. I remember the amazement of my doctors. They kept me in the hospital for 3 more days and then sent me home. I, of course, was terribly weak, so that a nurse had to come to my house and give me injections. Soon even that was not needed, and I could walk by myself and travel to see the doctor. That was an amazing miracle. Thus the grace of God touched me through the supplications of our great man of prayer. While lying in the hospital, I vowed to myself that, if the Lord would help me to get well, I would give all my strength to serving our church, and I at once gave myself over to his work. That was during the time that the cathedral was being built. Blessed John had invited and designated people for the new building committee, and I joined it. appointed by the Archbishop. Up to this day I carefully preserve the paper of my affirmation with Blessed John's signature. Contact with the Blessed One continued all the years he was with us, and spiritually it did not cease even after his demise. I feel his presence, and I believe that he is praying for all of us before the throne of God the Almighty. On the eve of Blessed John's departure for Seattle, just a few days before his passing away, I drove him to hospitals, as I had always done both day and night when it had been necessary for him. These 2 days, Sunday and Monday, were the last days I saw him alive. Afterwards he left for Seattle, and on Saturday came that frightful, bitter news of his death. It is difficult to talk about and remember those days, which were utterly painful and terrible for all of us, but I was honored to be appointed in charge of the sepulchre of our great man of prayer, our Wonderworker, of whom I am one of the living witnesses. I often see Blessed John in my dreams. Here, just recently, I again saw him, blessing me with the cross. I always strictly kept the fast established by our church, but once by mistake I ate some meat during Lent, and the same night I saw Blessed John. He came to me and reproached me, saying that I broke the fast. I saw him so clearly and vividly, as I had during his lifetime. The frequency of visitors to Blessed John's sepulchre increases with each year, which can be surmised from the amount of candles which are placed to burn by his coffin. More and more people ask for oil from the ever-burning lamp at his grave, firmly believing that this oil helps to relieve their sicknesses. Let this letter of mine, this witness, add some extra lines to the Book of Blessed John's veneration. Vladimir M. Naumov, San Francisco, California, 1976. From personal correspondence and from my memoirs in Russian, San Francisco, 1975. 47. Healing of a hopelessly sick doctor. In the Russian colony in Shanghai in the 1940s, there was a well-known doctor, Nicholas C., who became gravely ill. His ailment was so serious that one concilium of doctors followed another. The best specialists came from afar for consultations, but there was no turn for the better in the condition of the sick man, and his wife was made to understand that she must be prepared for his end. During one difficult night of keeping watch at the bed of her sick husband, Mrs. C. could no longer endure the frightful despair and hopelessness. Entrusting the watch of the sick man to a nurse on duty, she ran to the Surety of Sinners Cathedral. Her only thought was to see Bishop John, implore his prayers, and seek his help and support. It was dark outside. From the hospital to the cathedral, one had to walk about 15 long city blocks. The evening service in the cathedral had ended a long time before. Mrs. C. went to the narrow alley that led past the cathedral towards the house where the ruling bishop, John, lived at that time. In the dark alley, a small, hurrying figure appeared coming towards her like a shadow. It came closer and closer, and finally she recognized it to be Bishop John. Not giving her a chance to say a word, he uttered, "Yes, I know, let's go and pray." They entered the dark cathedral. He went into the altar and prayed for a long time there. A feeling of fervent prayer also gripped Mrs. C., and she prayed with all her soul. "And now let's go to him," said the bishop, and they walked to the hospital through the dark streets of the sleeping city. At the bed of the sick man who lay there unconscious, the bishop prayed and blessed him. Then he blessed the woman and left. As always, after an inspiring prayer so characteristic of him, the eyes of Blessed John shone with a brilliant light. Later, Mrs. C. often described to her friends how the eyes of the bishop shone like the stars. Towards morning, the doctor felt better, and in a few days he began slowly to recover until he got well. He emigrated together with the rest of the Russians from the Far East. Through all the phases of the evacuation, he worked for 2 years as a physician in the refugee camp on Tubabao, then came to America and worked for several years, not in the full capacity of a doctor, but still in his profession. Such was the power of Blessed John's faith and prayer. We who knew him in China, Europe, or America can tell an endless amount of facts about cases when, due to the power of his prayer and his faith in God, people got well who had been hopelessly sick and condemned to die. Olga Ivanova Semeniuk, San Francisco, California, July 1972. 48. Help in asthma attacks. My dear friends, I greet you with the feast of Christmas and the New Year, and I wish you good health and all sorts of good things, but especially good health. In life this is everything. When there is none, life becomes hard. I read and reread all the time the magazines you sent me about Archbishop John in the Orthodox Word and Pravoslavny Blagovestnik. Since you work for the Archbishop John Memorial Society, it should interest you to know what I have already experienced several times. I suffer from intense attacks of asthma. Whenever they come, I turn with a prayer to Blessed John for his help before the Lord, and I forget all about the very existence of asthma for months, while previously I suffered from it without interruption. May God send you all the best. May he guard you and all your close ones. With deepest respects, Olga Sericao, São Paulo, Brazil, December 15th, 1967, 49. Salvation from typhus. The memory of our dear Blessed John is fresh and will never be erased from our generation of his contemporaries. I remember him when he first arrived in Shanghai and was still a young bishop. At that time I was 23 years old, but in spite of my young years, my lot was such that I had to drink a lot of sorrow and pour out a lot of tears. Every day I used to go with my little son to the early liturgy, which was almost always served by Bishop John himself. As if feeling the state of my soul, he once so gently and compassionately asked me, "You have some sorrow?" Briefly I told him, and he understood at once and consoled me. After that, he became to me a substitute father, to whom I could always come for advice and consolation. From the very first day of his arrival, Blessed John was full of energetic activity, giving all his time, days, and often even nights, to the sick, the unfortunate, the little orphans, and to his extraordinary prayers and church services, forgetting himself, forgetting to eat, or even simply to dress himself properly, as is customary of his rank. Nevertheless, he was surrounded by many evil-doing opponents who not only gave trouble to his work in various ways, but who even accused him of the most ridiculous things which are even now frightful to remember. Yes, Blessed John did not watch how he dressed, did not take care of himself. He would wear sandals on his bare feet, would hastily put on his klobuk in any old way. This made him appear unfit for the image of his high rank, but those who knew him closely and who saw his bright childlike smile, his kind and friendly eyes, especially when he was talking to children, those people could not help but see in him a true pastor who was giving his soul for his flock. During the war I signed up for nursing courses, and in the course of my study I was appointed to keep watch in different hospitals and clinics. I remember how Blessed John would make visits to all the hospitals, how he would bend down at the head of the beds of sick ones, consoling and praying with them. I know that often after his visits the sick would feel better and receive a moral uplift, and their sufferings would not appear to them so terrible. There were many Russian people in Shanghai then. Many of them were also in prisons. Even there, Blessed John brought light and hope to these unfortunate ones, admonishing them, often giving them confession and Holy Communion, consoling the incarcerated, and kindling faith and hope in them. I cannot even begin to talk about what Blessed John did for the refugees when China went over into the hands of the communists. It is true that no one wanted to accept the homeless Russian people who were deprived of all rights and every possession, and all know how Blessed John, on his knees, being already an archbishop, procured permission to evacuate the refugees to islands, which they left when various countries gradually began to give refuge to them. I know that some people were thereby saved from the claws of the Chinese communists. These communists were not only dissatisfied with everything, but even dared to again defame the bishop, who bore all with his usual meekness. The repulsive attack that Russians in America waged against Blessed John when he was placed on the seat of the accused in an American court, the shameless accusations, threats, and slanders, these evoked only a meek smile from the guileless righteous man who was being crucified and morally tormented by his own Russian people, even by his brother bishops, to whom he had never done any harm, only good. I will not even go into details about the endless miracles which occurred both during his life and now at the site of his grave. One could write a whole book about them. I myself, a sinful woman, have also been vouchsafed to receive help from him, not only in his presence, but from a long distance when he helped and comforted our family at a time when unavoidable danger threatened us. 1. To give a striking illustration, let me cite a case of his prayerful help described by my friend Olga Ivanovna Semenyuk, who was very close to the church and church matters in Shanghai, and who is now in America and California. At one time I was made very happy because for a certain period I was entrusted by doctors to take care of Blessed John when he was sick. In those days I had seen for the first time in my life a man who was entirely devoted to the Lord. He did not stop for a minute in his prayers. The doctor's orders were absolutely ignored by him, and no power could bar him from church services. If it chanced that the doctors put him to bed, then in a few minutes he would be already in the altar leading the communion prayer service. Soon I myself experienced the power of his prayers and intercessions for us sinners before the Lord. My eldest son, B, had always been Blessed John's altar boy in church, but suddenly on Saturday, November 16, 1943, he told me he could not go to the vigil. He was already 17 years old. I asked him why. "Mama," answered my boy, "my head hurts and there's a terrible pain in my stomach." I became alarmed and put him to bed, hoping that during the night the pain would go away. Suddenly, at 11 p.m., Blessed John came to visit us, and asking us to leave our son's room, remained with him alone and prayed for a long, long time. When he came out, he said, "Do not be afraid, everything will be all right." I did not even understand that we were in grave danger. Blessed John left. In the morning, my son was in delirium with a high fever, complaining of terrible pain in his whole body. In fear, we called on several physicians, and they had a conference. The doctor said that we should at once get the boy to the hospital. At this time, our bishop came again, confessed, and gave Holy Communion to the boy, and once more consoled us. When we brought our son to the hospital, several doctors gave him a thorough examination and made the diagnosis. Our son had dysentery, pneumonia of the left lung, and typhus. At once they advised us to take him to another hospital, that of the Orthodox Brotherhood, where there was a large warm room for our sick boy. The Russian doctor at this hospital, Dr. Alexeyenko, examined my son and said to me, "There is no hope. Your son will not live through this." In total despair and grief, I ran to Blessed John. I fell on my knees before him and weeping begged him, "Save my son, pray for him. I believe only in your intercession before God." Blessed John was in stern concentration. He consoled me somehow and then went with me to the hospital. Since that day he visited my son day and night, and all the time prayed over him. In about 3 days, when I came to see my son, he regained consciousness and said, "Mother, what a shocking dream I saw today. I saw Blessed John, and I saw many doctors and nurses, and I saw myself also, as if it was yesterday, dressed all in white, and then I woke up. I thought to myself that most likely my son would die and that I should dress him all in white. The doctors were no longer making any attempt to make him well again because they considered him near death. The day after this dream, my son began to recover. Thus, thanks to the prayers of our holy man, he got well and was even vouchsafed to see his future in the dream. Presently, he quite successfully and with love works as a doctor himself and wears white. The late Dr. Alexeyenko and other witnesses confirmed that only the prayers of Blessed John had brought my son from the grave and incurable sickness to life. Glory to God who has given us such a man of prayer. Glory to God that we were made worthy to live and pray with such a righteous one as our late Hierarch John. May there be eternal and good memory to him. 2. Before me is a pack of letters of Blessed John, which I meticulously treasure. They are so hard to understand, ugly little scribblings, but such dear ones and so well comprehensible to me. My fate was throwing me to different countries, often very far away, and Blessed John would lose track of me, and then suddenly I would receive a letter. Recently I was in Brussels, in the cathedral memorial dedicated to the new crowned martyr Nicholas II, on your name day, and prayed for you. He remembered all, he prayed for all. If you take the Beatitudes, they are all applicable to him. Only one thing remains to be added. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. With the saints give rest, O Lord, to the soul of thy servant, the ever-memorable Bishop John, and through his holy prayers have mercy on us. Regina Van Setters, February 1977, Cannes, France. 50. Healing of appendicitis. Dear Fathers, I am writing to you at this time to relate the following incident which happened 1 week after the day of Archbishop John's repose this year. On June 25, 1977, late in the morning, I fell sick with an insufferable pain in my abdomen, with the greatest pain on my lower right side. I stayed in my bed, and the pain persisted. In the mid-afternoon, I took holy water and made the sign of the cross and drank some. Then, after praying to Archbishop John, I drank from the small bottle of oil from the lamp that burns in his sepulchre in San Francisco. My landlady, who is a nurse at the Veterans Hospital here, thought it was appendicitis and wanted to take me to the doctor. In the early evening, when the pain had not diminished, she took me to the doctor. After examining me, she said I had all the symptoms of appendicitis and immediately sent me to the hospital, where I was examined by a surgeon, who confirmed the doctor's findings and admitted me to the hospital. The surgeon did not operate immediately because he felt it was in the early stages, and he wanted to wait and see what happened. Because of this, they could give me nothing for the pain, which was so great that I could not sleep. Finally, I fell asleep about 3 a.m., saying the Jesus Prayer, with spontaneous supplications to Archbishop John interspersed. When I awoke about 8 a.m. on June 26th, the pain was greatly diminished, and by the next morning, Sunday, June 27th, it was completely gone, and I was released from the hospital that afternoon. Many laboratory tests were run on the many blood samples and other specimens taken from me. Although the symptoms of appendicitis were present, the tests were all negative, showing nothing. I thank God for this miraculous cure through the intercession of our blessed Archbishop John. In spite of my many shortcomings and sins, he never fails to come to my aid. John Van Hulten, October 6, 1977, Huntington, New York. 51. Help in acquiring seminary education. Last November, I became concerned with a very serious misunderstanding that may have been the cause of my losing academic accreditation, which was needed to continue to serve God's people as a priest. After many long interviews and conferences with the academic community and authorities, all finally turned out well. During all this time, I had prayed to John Maximovitch and had had a panakida offered at his tomb. Mr. Boris Troyan placed my name under the Archbishop's mitre, and I was able to enjoy a certain peace of soul, although these were stormy times. Within the week, the degrees were cleared, and I am now happy to serve God's people as a priest. God is glorified in his saints as we continue to experience Blessed John's prayerful and loving presence with us. Father Joseph, September 13, 1978, New York City. 52. Healing of emphysema. My sister-in-law, Sophia Nikolaevna Verhitsky, sent me from Santa Barbara a little piece of cotton with oil from the lamp at Blessed John's sepulchre, together with a prayer addressed to our Lord Jesus Christ, through the prayers of Blessed John of Shanghai and Archpriest Mitrophon, who was martyred by the Bolsheviks. There were instructions from Archimandrite Mitrophon, a spiritual son of both Blessed John and Archpriest Mitrophon. While saying this prayer, anoint the 6 spots on my husband for the course of 1 month. I had lost all faith because my husband's spiritual and physical condition had been getting worse. My husband is 89 years old. He is a medical professor, and when he saw his latest x-ray, he said, "No physicians will help me, only God can. My sickness is an old age sickness, emphysema of the lungs, which is incurable. It turned out to be cancerous and could still be surgically removed. However, while tuberculosis is now successfully treated, the enlargement of lung cells, emphysema, is not helped much even when treated surgically. Furthermore, such operations are available only to very rich people. So we placed all our hope in the mercy of God. Of course, you can imagine how overjoyed we were to receive the holy oil. hospital. I at once began to anoint my husband's chest and back on both sides, as well as his forehead, as is customarily done by clergy when they anoint, pronouncing with faith the above-mentioned prayer, and after that, exactly on the 30th day, there was a noticeable improvement in his breathing. The gasping for air disappeared altogether, and his mind was more alert. And now my husband is absolutely healthy. One thing that still remains is a very extended sleep, but they say that in sleep all sickness goes away. His appetite is gradually returning, and we hope that he will soon get strong. I wrote all this to my sister-in-law in California, who gave me Father Mitrofan's address. I am asking your holy prayers and blessing for us, slaves of God Theodore and Catherine. With much respect, your Catherine Nikolaevna Verhitsky, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Day of the Holy Trinity, Pentecost, June 14, 1970. 53. Help in finding work. Deeply revering our unforgettable Archbishop John, I would like to share with others how I more than once experienced the power of miracles through his prayers. I came to America with my son on January 25, 1952. We came from Tubabao in the Philippines, where I had gone right from the hospital to get on the ship. Having arrived in America, we settled at the house of our sponsor. My health was very bad. Being in such a condition, it was difficult to find any kind of work. Besides, we had no idea. The country was foreign, and the language not our own. In despair, I wrote a letter to Archbishop John, with tears begging him to, through his holy prayers, help me in my difficult situation. The day after I sent off the letter, I was called and offered to work in a factory. The work was hard, but with the grace of God and the prayers of Blessed John, I managed to work there for a year and a half without any trouble. Considering our disadvantage as immigrants, I clearly felt that thanks to Blessed John's prayers, I was given a special inflow of strength, both physical and moral, which so wondrously appeared in connection with finding work and thus led to success in getting settled in a foreign country. Nina Sigismundova Makovoy, May 1968, Bright, California. 54. Healing of fingers. The second case of Blessed John's intercession occurred when I received healing during his lifetime. I used to work at an electronic plant. I had to polish minute parts on an electric sharpening belt, about 3,000 a day. It was a great strain on my fingers, and their joints began to jump out of place, which was unpleasant and painful. I consulted doctors. At first they applied heat in some special manner, but it did not help. Then they operated on both fingers, but my fingers continued jumping in their points as before. In 2 months they again tried surgery, and my condition remained as it was. I was in despair and knew not what to do. At that time our dear Archbishop John was to visit Los Angeles, and I went. There were many people. Everyone wanted to receive his blessing. I stood to the side with my bandaged fingers. It was hard to push myself through such a crowd. At this moment Father Boris Kritsky approached me and asked, "Why don't you ask for the holy prayers of Archbishop John?" I indicated to him the crowd surrounding Blessed John. He took my hand and energetically began to move through the crowd, asking to let a sick person go forward. I approached the Blessed Archbishop and in brief told him about my ailment, with tears asking for his holy prayers. And a miracle occurred through his prayers. After a short time I again went to Father Boris. He asked me, "How are your fingers?" Fingers? I was surprised, having completely forgotten about my fingers. My fingers were completely healthy. It was an obvious miracle. Great is the power of our unforgettable Archbishop John. Nina Sigismundovna Makovoy, same as above. 55. Disappearance of a carbuncle. I experienced yet a third case through the prayers of Blessed John. This is what happened. While swimming in the sea, I caught an infection. It developed into a huge swelling on my neck, which turned out to be a very malignant carbuncle. From it, not only my neck, but even my head swelled up. They injected penicillin, but nothing helped. It would neither develop nor dissolve. It seemed to me that I would not endure any longer and would die, and thus, when it got especially bad, I used my last strength to reach the telephone and ask A.T. Simonovich to remember me during proskomedia, during Divine Liturgy. After that, I took a tablet of medicine and fell asleep. When I woke up, I was told the joyful news that A.T. Simonovich had immediately sent a telegram to Blessed John in France, requesting his holy prayers for me, the sick one. When I learned about that, I at once lost all doubt about my recovery. In 3 days, the answer came from Blessed John: I'm praying. Since the carbuncle persisted and did not break, the doctors cut it and took some to make a culture, and only after that did they find out how to treat it. 4 months passed by. When I finally got well, Dr. Roybo told my husband in my presence, I did not expect a good outcome. Your wife's life was saved by some miracle. I knew too that it had been the prayers of Archbishop John which had made me healthy again and had put me back on my feet. Always dedicated to and deeply venerating our dear Blessed John, Nina Sigismundovna Maximovitch, same as above. 56. Help in avoiding surgery. My first meeting with His Eminence Archbishop John occurred when our church in Paris was modestly located in a garage on Ribera Street. He celebrated services there on Sundays, coming from Versailles, where he resided in the Cadet Corps. At that time, I worked as a taxi driver, renting a car from a garage and paying the owner of the car a certain percentage of each day's earnings. I was regularly attending our modest church. One Sunday, our church warden offered me to drive the Archbishop to Versailles. I agreed, but the bishop was detained in church for a long time. He had to talk with one or another person to give directions or make various decisions. Finally, we went. During the entire ride, the bishop was sitting next to me and talking. We remembered our cadet corps years. He was glad to know that I had also been a cadet, although in a different corps, that of Vladimir Kiev. The whole trip was filled with lively conversation. I still can't account for who was driving the car or by what power it was driven. When we finally arrived in Versailles, the bishop, having bestowed a blessing upon me, let me go. Only then was I able to start my work. I was disturbed with the worry of whether I would be able, having lost so many precious work hours, to give the necessary sum of money to my boss, but my worries were in vain. My work went so successfully that in a short time I collected a greater sum of money than necessary. I was incredibly lucky. I do not doubt in the least that my exceptional success was sent to me through the prayers of the bishop for the service I had rendered him. Later on, I drove the bishop many times and never had to worry. I was always extremely successful. When Archbishop John founded in Paris on Claude Lorraine Street the wonderful church dedicated to all saints of Russia, he also had there his modest cell and conducted services in this church every day, if he could. On Wednesdays and Fridays of Great Lent, he served the liturgy of the pre-sanctified gifts, during which only 3 of us were in the church, the bishop in the altar, where Father Mitrofan served with him, and I in the cleros. In his serving, this great man of prayer knew how to express and evoke in others a great power of faith and diligence in prayer. When I was the secretary of the parish council of our church, I was convinced, not only during meetings, but also during business encounters, how wisely, how simply, and with Christian love the bishop knew how to solve the rather frequent complicated questions. During this time our church and parish blossomed because we were protected by his saving prayers. I remember such a case. Among our parishioners there was a couple named T.S. The husband got sick and was taken to the hospital, where the doctors offered him the only treatment that would save him, immediate surgery. The sick man sent his wife to Blessed John to ask his advice and blessing. The wife came to the church on Claude Lorraine Street, but did not see the bishop. He had gone to Brussels on business. Father Abbot Mitrofan said to her, "Blessed John calls me every day at a particular hour. Soon I will talk to him and I will tell him about the sick man." So they agreed, and when Blessed John found out about the proposed operation, he thought for a while, evidently prayed, and said, "No need of surgery, he'll get well." The next morning, the sick man did not agree to be operated on and was removed from the hospital. He got well and is still alive today. I personally had such an incident. In 1965, I signed up for the annual group pilgrimage to the Holy Land. 10 days before the proposed departure, I unexpectedly became sick with some strange ailment, which was in such a severe form that any trip was unthinkable. I at once hastened to write to Blessed John in San Francisco and inform the pilgrimage leaders. 3 days prior to the departure of the group, I received a letter from Blessed John. Not a word about my sickness in his letter. He blessed me to go on the pilgrimage, and even entrusted to me as a frequent pilgrim to the Holy Land 2 new pilgrims. Having received this letter, I automatically forgot all about my severe sickness and pains. With the blessing of Archbishop John, the pilgrimage of that year turned out to be the most grace-filled. I can only say that our godly hierarch was performing his last service in Europe, a divine liturgy at the Lesna convent, when our Lord sent me his great mercy. He allowed me to serve the bishop in the altar in a sticarion for the first time in my life, fulfilling in this way my fervent wish. I believe this had special significance. Our Blessed John is undoubtedly now at the throne of the Most High God, and does not cease praying for us, and we here on earth must run to his intercession, asking his holy prayers, for we know that the ever-memorable Archbishop John is God's man, and his canonization by the earthly church is merely a matter of time. The truth of the above I can witness to with an oath. Nikolai Ivanovich Buchinsky, Montmorency, France, March 7th, 20th, 1977. 57. Healing of brain disease. 1. I came to Shanghai in 1946, being quite young and following after fashions. I used lipstick heavily. Once I came into the cathedral when Archbishop John was serving. At the end of the liturgy I came up to him for a blessing, intending to kiss the cross, but he did not give it to me to kiss. I stood aside and waited for a while. Then again I went up. He blessed me, but did not allow me to kiss the cross. I was leaving the cathedral almost crying, and said to some lady that the bishop had not allowed me to kiss the cross. But the woman said, "Look at yourself, how heavy is the lipstick on your lips." Since then, in my whole life, I have never put on lipstick when going to church, and I thank Blessed John for it. 2. From Shanghai, I left together with the Russian emigration to the island of Tubabao in the Philippines. All who came were placed in sectors. Together with us in our 11th sector was a Russian lady by the name of Olympiada Elnik. This is what she told me. I lived in Shanghai with my elderly mother in a tiny room, which we got with great difficulty. We paid a rather large sum of money for the key, as was customary there. It was very hard to get an apartment, and without a large sum of money it was nearly impossible to get a room. The landlady of our house was a very grouchy, nervous woman, but we endured her because we had no other place to go. One day she came and very crudely declared that we must move out because she was selling the house, and that by such and such a date our room should be vacated. Our tears and pleas did not do anything to her. Mother and I were in despair, knowing full well that it was simply impossible to get a room anywhere. We did not know what to do. A thought came to me to go and ask Bishop John for prayers. I had heard that the bishop prayed in the cathedral all night long. I prepared a letter in which I described our trouble, begging his prayers. At 4 o'clock in the morning, when it was still quite dark, I came to the cathedral. It was open. I entered, and it was very frightening. The entire empty cathedral was dark. Only here and there lampadas were flickering before icons. Looking around, I saw a silhouette that was kneeling near the iconostasis on the right side. This was the bishop. Timidly I approached him and stretched out my arm with the letter to the bishop, asking his prayers. But he pushed my hand with the letter aside, blessed me, and said, "Go with God, all will be well." I left, and only then remembered that out of fear I had not said anything about our trouble. He did not take my letter. How would he know what I had asked him to pray for? I came home depressed and went to bed. Early in the morning someone was knocking on the door. Having opened the door, we saw our landlady, who smiled politely, as we had never seen her do before, and said to us, "I decided not to sell the house. Remain and live here as long as you need to." This was told to me personally, and I do not doubt its validity. Olympiada is a religious and honest woman who lives now in Australia. 3. I believe that my daughter's life was saved through Blessed John's prayers. When she was 10 years old, she became sick with meningitis. Blessed John twice visited her in the hospital with the wonder-working Kursk icon of the Most Holy Mother of God. Thanks to his prayers, she got well, and the sickness left with no consequences. Glory to thine all-powerful might, O Lord. 4. Now I must say something about myself. All my life I have seen prophetic dreams before some vitally important moments, and they have come true. I saw Blessed John, and I shall remember this as long as I live, for it strengthened me in my faith. Soon after the death of our archpastor, I saw this dream. A huge temple was filled with people who were loudly and bitterly weeping over the death of Blessed John. I was standing in an adjacent room of rather small proportions, near a coffin, as in a sepulchre. In that coffin I saw Blessed John. I came closer and looked at his face. With trepidation in my heart, I saw that his eyes were open, and he, with a piercing, concentrated gaze, was looking straight into my soul as he had done during his life, and was observing me lovingly and with obvious joy. I was greatly moved in my heart. With joy and excitement, I went to the door that led into the main church, swung it wide open, and began to shout loudly to the people there, "Stop crying and lamenting. I know that our archpastor is alive. I saw his eyes. Don't cry. He is alive. He is happy. He is alive. He is alive." And so I woke up shouting that Blessed John was alive. 5. My childhood friend and fellow student at the convent school in Shanghai, Alla Leonova, lost her husband. When he was in Mukden in 1945 through 1946, he was taken by the Soviets and sent off to a concentration camp in Siberia. Alla had to raise 2 children by herself. When she found herself, as many did, on the island of Tubabao in 1949 before going to Australia, she went to Blessed John requesting permission to start divorce procedures, since there was obviously no hope of ever seeing her husband. Blessed John said, "If you want to, go ahead, but you will still see your husband." The words of Blessed John came true. After 28 years, in 1977, her husband came to San Francisco as a result of her daughter's successful attempts. In May of 1978, Alla got terribly sick. A dangerous virus got into her brain. They telephoned me and said that she had already been in a coma for 5 days. Several priests came and prayed. The morning after the telephone call, I went to the cathedral, had her name sent to the altar during liturgy, and then went downstairs to Blessed John's sepulchre. I slipped a little commemoration note for Alla's health under his mitre on his sarcophagus. I was later informed that, during that very hour of the morning, she had opened her eyes. Glory to thy power, O Lord. Glory to the power of thy servant's prayers. At first Alla's work was weak, but soon after, to the amazement of all the doctors, she began to recover. At first Alla's memory was weak, but soon after, to the amazement of all the doctors, she began to recover, and the sickness left her without any consequences. The doctors say that, with this ailment, even if people remain alive, which happens rarely, there are always bad consequences. Often I, a sinner, sorrow and pray and cry, because I am spiritually blind and stupid. I often think, O God, such a great saint and man of prayer, of such great spiritual power, walked amidst us, and we, not we, but I, valued him so little. Generally we are not too smart, but far-seeing sheep. We do not value our archpastors. Allah says the same. Forgive me, Blessed John. Forgive me, a sinner and unworthy one. With love in Christ, Vera S. Terahov, July 27, 1978, San Francisco, California. 58. Recovery from skin burns. We knew Blessed John very well when living in Shanghai. Our son was serving in the altar with the Holy Bishop, who had a special place in his heart for him and for us. We know many undeniably miraculous events which were witnessed and testified to by word of mouth from many, but not so many were put in printed form. That's why we anticipate our accounts, as brief as they are, seeing the light of publication. When we came to America from China, we settled in Monterey. Blessed John visited us several times when his former acolyte, our son Vladimir, was attending school. We even have a good photo of us together with the Holy Bishop outside the Monterey St. Seraphim Church, where our son also served as an altar boy for Father Gregory Kravchina, the pastor of that church. I must confess that several unpleasant incidents occurred in that parish, which dampened our fervency towards attending church. But since Archbishop John kept on writing to our son not to abandon church, our son felt compelled to frequent it, and did this quite diligently. But I murmured. One day, upon being reminded to give rides to church, I complained, saying that under such a strain it is not worth the gasoline that it takes to get to church. Very soon after that, a very terrible thing happened to us. On May 2nd, 1954, I was alone at home, trying with gasoline to take stains off a rubber raincoat. I was in our small porch. All the windows were closed. Since there was a gas heater that was turned on, an explosion occurred. All was in flames and I was burning. I jumped out and immersed myself in a pool. Our neighbor called an ambulance. A doctor came and said that it was a miracle that my eyes had remained whole, since even the glass in the windows had burned. They immediately took me to a hospital where I lay for several days. They brought me home on a stretcher.